About those energy spikes, the insurgents had a
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Soberg501 and today I want to go over a firepower focused build for the Technomancer that is able to solo challenge tier 15 expeditions with gold completion times. Now before we get into the video, only 6% of people that watch my videos are subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all of my videos. And this build also takes a lot less time to get up to challenge tier 15 than my last Devastator build did. So first off, the abilities we're using for this build. First off, we have Cold Snap, which is a massive AoE freeze. It helps us with being able to survive certain situations because of the massive amount of CC. Helps us hit headshots very easily to increase our damage. And we have a few things that synergize with this. It actually turns this ability into a pretty heavy burst damage ability. Then we have Blighted Rounds, which is what this build is mainly focused on. It makes all of your shots apply toxic to enemies, which we have a lot of synergies for. You do more damage to toxic, toxic applies vulnerability, and so on. And then also, enemies standing close to our initial target take 50% of the damage you deal to the main target, so it adds a massive amount of AoE damage. And our build is also focused on never having to reload, so we'll have Blighted Rounds up 100% of the time. Then finally, we have Blighted Turret, which you just throw out a turret that deals damage, and actually has a pretty long range, but we also have a mod that turns this into cryo damage to add a massive amount of CC to our build. Next up, we have our class skill tree. We have weapon damage increase, weapon leech increase, we have armor piercing increase, critical damage increase. Then we have anytime toxic is applied to an enemy, they have vulnerability on themselves as well, which baseline makes them take 30% increased damage. Then we have when vulnerability is on an enemy, it is 40% more effective, so they take a lot more damage from vulnerability, which with our build on any enemy we shoot. Then we have increased max health and increased armor. I went down to get these two, which is a little bit different than some of the builds going with a similar playstyle because we have more than enough damage for golding CT15 expeditions, but the build overall still feels a little bit squishy, so I went down with some more survivability. Then we have decreases the range of what's considered long range, and a lot of our build and damage is focused on being at long range, so this helps with even closer enemies still being considered at long range. Increase weapon damage, decreases the distance of what's considered long range again, increases weapon damage. Then we have increases our assault rifle damage and increases the drop rate of assault rifles, which does help with getting better rolled weapons for our build. Increases our assault rifle weapon damage, increases our armor piercing. And this is also another reason that I went into some more survivability talents, because this increases the damage we take but also the damage we deal, so we're a little bit more of a glass cannon, so I want some more survivability with that. Increases your long range damage by 30%, again synergizing with a lot of our other stats and some of our other talents. Increase our magazine by 50%. This helps massively with never having to reload with our Blighted Rounds. Then enemies affected by toxic take 15% more damage, so just some additional damage, and everything we shoot is going to be affected by toxic anyway. Then we have activating a decay ability, increase our weapon damage by 40% for 10 seconds. This is another reason why we're using Blighted Turret, because baseline we can keep this damage buff up pretty much 100% of the time. So next up we have our weapons. Now there are a bunch of different weapons that work well with this build, but if you want to be completely optimized and use the best possible, you're going to be wanting to use an assault rifle that is the tactical variation. So that means it's a burst fire rifle, because burst fire has a lot more base damage than fully automatic. It has slightly higher crit chance. It just shoots slower, but with how this build works, with also being built on long range damage, this version is also much more accurate at longer ranges and doesn't have as much damage drop off. So you're going to really want that. The main roles you're going to be looking for are crit damage and long range damage, as you can see on here. The third role isn't that important and should really only be focused on when you have a really good role for everything else. One of the main things you are going to want on your weapon is Killing Spree, which is just stacking damage buff from killing enemies. Gives 25% every stack, stacks up to 3 times, and it lasts 20 seconds, but it deteriorates over time. So essentially what that means is once you get one stack and then get a second stack, the first stack's timer will not refresh. So some stacking things in the game, once you get one of the stacks and then a second stack, it will refresh the timer on all stacks. This doesn't do that, but with how quick you kill everything, you will have 3 stacks of this the majority of the time. So it's just a 75% weapon damage increase, which is massive. It's one of the most important parts of the build. And I got a pretty well rolled rifle. It seems that epic rifles are going to be the absolute best rolled weapons for this build. And I got Gravediggers Frenzy on this, which critical shots increase your critical damage by 50% for 5 seconds with a 10-second cooldown. This is just a massive critical damage buff increase. The second mod on this can definitely be a bunch of different things. This is a really good one, and mainly what you're going to be looking for, like I said, is killing spree rolled onto the weapon, crit damage, long range damage rolls, and then the highest firepower on the weapon you could possibly get. Now, some other decent weapons, I have Absolute Zero here, which is decently rolled because it comes with Gravedigger's Frenzy. It's a fully automatic variation of the rifle, so it's not going to be as good as burst fire, but it's still good if you're still looking for a better rifle. Thunderbird is decent. I use this for a while. Again, another fully automatic, but still decent. And one of the best legendaries for this is the Inferno Seed, which I've been completely unlucky and I haven't gotten that on any of my characters yet. It is a burst fire legendary rifle with a decent tier 3 mod on it. So if you happen to get that, even though it's not the absolute best god rolled, it's still going to be a very good burst fire rifle. So next we have our armor pieces. For our attributes, this is the tier list you're going to want to follow. Bonus firepower for just straight damage increase. Long range damage because it synergizes with our class talents. We're going to want to stay at long range a lot of the time. It's a massive damage increase. Those are going to be the main things you want on every piece if possible. The third is going to be cooldown reduction, mainly so we can use Cold Snap as much as possible. The more we can use Cold Snap, the easier it's going to be able to survive and the more damage we're going to be able to put out with that. And then the fourth, if you can't get cooldown reduction, is close range damage. It can be a decent damage increase sometime because if you're facing any of the beasts, those are going to get close range a lot of the time and you're not going to be able to avoid it. And then some shooting enemies are going to get close range and be unavoidable sometimes. Now, first off, I want to go over the legendary piece I currently have. And the reason for that is because this is a pretty good legendary piece. One of the attributes is status power. I'd like to have something different, but some of the reasons this is so good is because you can get this from Tiaga just for resource pods and it's not that expensive, especially once you get into the mid challenge here. You should be able to buy this pretty easily. It starts at level 45. It has bonus firepower and long range damage, which are our main stats. And the tier 3 that comes on this is incredibly good for our build. So it's 4 Cold Snap, and when you kill an enemy that's frozen by Cold Snap, it deals over 200,000 damage at a 5-meter radius. Now, this is going to deal a lot more damage than that when we're actually in combat. This can cause massive chain reactions, as you'll see in some of the footage. I'll freeze a bunch of smaller enemies, shoot one, kill it, it'll blow up, kill other enemies, and then those all blow up. So you can sometimes get chain reactions that just clear out a ton of different enemies. And this is also a help that puts cooldown reduction up to our third most powerful attribute stat. And then I rolled Captain Hunter on this. Increases our damage against elites by 25%. That's a massive damage increase. Now I am working towards a build that is similar to this, but is using the 3-step bonus of this, which increases our damage massively against frozen enemies. So that'll probably be an update with this build, but I haven't gotten many other pieces of this set yet. But this set piece by itself is incredibly strong and very easy to get. So next up for our helm, we have a pretty decently rolled helm, bonus firepower, long range damage. Then we have close range damage. I would like this to have cooldown reduction, but that's still decent. Then we have ice component, which turns our blighted turret into freeze now, which is massive. This adds a lot of survivability to our build because we can have freeze turret up 100% of the time, and it CCs a bunch of enemies and has a pretty long range. Does a little bit of extra damage, but it's mainly for CCing enemies. Then another one of the talents that's absolutely needed for this build to work, and this is how we get infinite ammo and never have to reload, is Toxic Lead. Killing enemies afflicted with Toxic will instantly replenish 40% of the ammo in your magazine. Now, if you pay attention to your ammo and make sure not to just spam it all on an elite or boss enemy, you should be able to never have to reload your weapon and never have to reload your toxic rounds, because toxic rounds applies toxic to everything. If you pay attention, you can always have ammo in your magazine and never have to reload with this mod. Both of these mods are very, very important for this build, and Toxic Lead is absolutely needed. If you don't have Toxic Lead, this build won't work. Next up, we have our legs, and this has the perfect rolls for attributes, bonus firepower, long range damage, cooldown reduction. Now, the first mod on this is kind of a wasted mod slot. It lets us have 2 magazines of Blighted Rounds instead of 1. It's helped me a few times when I wasn't paying attention to the ammo in my magazine enough, but it very rarely ever does anything. This is the one thing on this piece I would like to roll off. But our secondary mod is incredibly incredibly good, and I would recommend always having for this build. Killing enemies while aiming down sights grants 45,000 armor for 10 seconds stacked to 3 times. So this will be stacked up pretty much 100% of the time, and this adds a massive amount of armor to our build. You're always going to be wanting to aim down sights when killing most things, and this should be up all the time. And without this, you're going to get killed a lot just by random flying bullets or melees. This is one of our highest survivability mods that we have in this build. Next, we have our gloves. This is a decently rolled piece, bonus firepower, long range damage, has healing received, which does help slightly for our build, but that's something I would really like to have a better roll on. Then this rolled with radical therapy, deal 15% more damage by enemies afflicted by toxic. That's just a 15% damage increase. Pretty decent. Not sure if there's going to be any other mods I can roll on this that's better than that, but that's still a decent one. Then I rolled on crit stack on it. This is a pretty strong mod. Critical shots build up a 5-second stacking effect that gives you 3,000 anomaly power and 6,700 firepower bonuses, stacks up 5 times. Now, with my specific build, how much firepower I have and how much this gives, this is a 20% firepower increase when fully stacked, which is pretty massive, and these stacks refresh, so they don't deteriorate. So if we get one stack, then get a second, the first stack's timer will also refresh. So this would be up almost 100% of the time. So this is just a 20% firepower increase a vast majority of the time. Then finally, we have our boots. These are very well-rolled boots. Bonus firepower, long-range damage, cooldown reduction, the best attributes we can get. Now, this does have critical analysis, increase your critical damage with Blighted Rounds by 15%. Now, this is decent. I do think there's going to be better mods for this, so that's one area with the boots I could slightly increase, but it's still a decent damage increase. Then another mod that's very good for this build is Bloodlust. Killing shots increase your firepower by 12,000, stacked up 3 times, and deteriorates every 10 seconds. So this is another one where once we get one stack and then get a second stack, the first stack's timer will not refresh, but with how much we're killing, this should be up a majority of the time. And this is also a massive damage increase. I think this is over 20% firepower increase as well. So just constantly stacking up more and more firepower increases. So that is pretty much the entirety of the build. It's fully focused on using the Technomancer's base weapon life leech, getting massive weapon damage, massive firepower, massive damage boost through your mods to do incredible damage, be able to 1 burst or 2 burst most enemies in the game, and then use your other abilities to add a good amount of CC to the build to allow you to survive much more easily. And when playing this build, the main things you have to focus on are staying at long ranges, hitting headshots and hitting crits as much as you possibly can, and playing a more nimble playstyle. Always roll away if enemies are trying to get in melee range. You're not a super tanky class like the Devastator, so you can't take a ton of hits. If you're ever on fire, make sure to roll to put that out. You don't have very much defenses against status effects on you. And then, like I said, just try to stay at long ranges and hit headshots because you're going to kill most enemies pretty quickly. So it's just going to be a very nimble and glass cannon style of playstyle. So subscribe if you want to see more Outriders or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this build. And thanks for watching.
More of them. All I'm missing is some elevator music. Whatever that thing is, it should disable it. Shira, there's an elevator in this lab.
Yeah, that might be the blueprint.
Whoa. Shira, about those energy spikes? The insurgents had a functioning power cell down here.
What did you do with it?
It's disabled. I'll see if Zahidi can't take a look at it.
Outriders
And found a
detected.
pod down here.
Access
You
granted.
saved some lives today, Outrider. I would expect nothing less from you.